And we are live. So, Coach Steve, thanks for coming back.
So
So I had reached out to you a couple weeks ago, maybe a week or so ago, because you
mhm,
had posted something on your Instagram about kind of a unhealthy perception of what exercise needs to be, right? So I think a lot of people fall into this trap of needing, like, you need to be like laying in a puddle of sweat and tears after each training session.
mhm.
And you were kind of bringing to light that that's not really the case whatsoever.
Yeah,
And I saw that and I reached out to you. I was just like, we should totally talk about this because I love it. So here we are.
yeah,
So as always, thank you for giving me a little bit of your time. Always nice to see you.
absolutely.
And if you want to just kind of, roll with it and we can go back and forth and just kind of go.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to bring him a little more light, the original Instagram post that I had pretty much said like, can we talk about the unhealthy relationship people have with exercise and the fact that they need to feel like they're dying in order to have like a great workout. Like I know personally for me, I don't know about for you, but like people have come up to me and been like, yeah, I was working out with this trainer. We had like such an awesome leg day. I couldn't walk for like 4 days. I'm like, that's not
Why?
like I understand like there are times where you have like more difficult training sessions, but at no point in time should training interrupt your life, especially for
Yeah.
someone who's more just like you work out for recreational activity or just to stay healthy and stay in shape is what people would like to consider it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm just under the mindset that training should be something that improves your way of life as opposed to hindering it.
Yeah.
And as someone who trains athletes, if I was to ever train a kid and we were having workouts and he couldn't walk for 4 days, that means that he can't play a sport. So
Yeah. So you're doing more damage than good in that sense.
absolutely, when you're a trainer or any type of strength coach, your ultimate goal is to make somebody better for the sport that they play, as opposed to just being a weight room, like everything being focused on the weight room. So
Yeah.
that was just kind of like my general idea when I was creating that post. Um, and I
Yeah.
think it
No.
really,
And go
what's
ahead.
up?
Go. No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I think it really applies to more of just like the like general population, as opposed to like there's that just big misconception that you need to be dying in the gym every single time.
I think it applies to like all aspects of fitness too, because I think people have this same relationship when it comes to their nutrition. Where it's like people have this like all-in mentality. I
Mhm.
need to do this 110% or nothing, or
Yeah.
it doesn't count.
Hmm.
And I think that sort of extremist sort of view is why people aren't able to necessarily, fulfill or continue with these, and reach their goals, right? Because
Yeah.
if you're going into the gym, if your goal is to lose 10, 20, 30 pounds, whatever it is,
Mhm.
um, and you're going in with the intent of beating the hell out of yourself to the gym, beating the hell out of yourself every day, how long can you possibly sustain that? To the
Yep.
point
Exactly.
where like you're not going to reach your goal because you're just going to be so exhausted. Not to mention all like the metabolic reasons why you're probably in more of a state of metabolism than anabolism and blah blah blah. But like just mentally, it's going to be
Yeah.
fatiguing and taxing and unsustainable. And I think it's the same thing when it comes to different diets and nutrition. Like people can flip their whole diet and lose, again, 5, 10, 20, whatever pounds in X amount of months if they're sticking to this program. And people can
Hmm.
do it for, let's say it's a 6 week, 12 week, nutrition program. People can do that. What happens then is, 12 weeks is over. I'm going to go back to doing what I was doing before because it's
Yep.
not sustainable. If it was sustainable, you'd be able to continue to do it past the
Mhm.
12 weeks. So now
Yep.
I've lost the weight and, I've reached my 12 weeks. Now I'm just going to revert back to what I was doing. Or in the
Mhm.
exercise sense, I'm just going to quit because I'm exhausted and I hate this.
Yep.
and what good did it do you? I mean, you achieved part of your goal or you got halfway there, but if you're not going to use that momentum to build and get to where you want to be, then
Mhm.
what real good was it? Plus the fact that if you're training, this hard so regularly, you're just increasing your chances for injury.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a reason that sports have off seasons. It's just not sustainable to do that for the entire year. Like there's not a sport that exists right now that doesn't really have an off season. Like you have your football season, you have your baseball season. Even when it comes to powerlifting,
Yeah.
most of those people compete and then they take time off because they basically just destroyed their body for a very long period of time.
Yeah.
And when it comes to training for a lot of these sports, a lot of those are not like it's not necessary to necessarily kill yourself in the gym. Now there are exceptions to this. Like if your sport revolves around lifting weights, so Olympic lifting,
Mhm.
powerlifting, those are two sports where you have to have hard gym sessions because your entire sport revolves around
It's
how much
that's the
weight you
sport.
lift. Yeah. So it's very different from say someone who's a football player. Like yes, we might have hard workouts in the off season because we're trying to prep you for the season, but none of those workouts should be something that is breaking you down to the point where you feel like you can't function. And you brought
Sure.
up a great point with nutrition. Like all of those things are long term. It's long term. You're playing the long game. You're trying to establish habits that can carry you for a long period of time.
Mhm.
Working out would be the same thing for a lot of people. When it comes to athletics, it's a little bit different because you are training for a particular time of the year, but the goal is still, at the end of the day, longevity. Like no one wants to, train super hard, kill yourself, and you have 1 year, and then after that, you can't function for the rest of your career.
Yeah.
So it's always like people don't think in terms of long term. It's always about what can I get right now. It's like instant.
Well,
What is it?
that's pretty
Instant
much
gratification.
the it's pretty much our society is everything needs to be instantaneous or it's not
Yeah.
worth anything.
Hmm.
But it's also good. You talk about training athletes a lot because generally you're working with athletes or
Yeah.
you exclusively work with athletes. Um, the average person needs to take into consideration like you're not an athlete. You don't need to train like these people.
Yeah.
Like there's a reason why I'm sure the entirety of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Chiefs. I'm sure not a single one of them is stepping foot into the gym for like a month, and I'm sure they're just taking time off and like letting their body recover. Like you shouldn't be training that hard to where you need a month's recovery. Like that's
Yeah.
not the goal. Like especially if your goal is just to again lose a little weight, get a little stronger, just be healthy in general. Like
Hmm.
you don't have to train like a professional athlete. Like these are people who are pushing their body to the absolute limit
Hmm.
because like their job dictates it.
Yeah, and even if there are those people who do want to train like an athlete or something similar to an athlete, because I don't really think that there's a crazy difference in the training modalities that people can have from an athlete to someone who's not an athlete. 'Cause right now, if your
Mm-hmm.
body is capable of performing a lot of these movements, there's no reason that you can't do it. The thing is, you just mitigate volume and intensity of those things. So like,
Yeah. So if
so
you're talking about like specific exercises and stuff,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so like if I train someone who's like a 40-year-old office worker or just works at a desk all the time, there's no reason that they can't do a sled push sprint if
Mm-hmm.
their body is capable of it. But I'm not going to
Sure.
have them walk into a gym and be like, all right, we're on the sled, 100% sprints, get after it right now. We're going to go until you throw up. There's no need to do any of that. But you
But
can
yeah, and I
still,
guess, and I want to make sure that the point I was making comes across clear. Obviously, there's going to be intertangling of the different exercises.
yeah.
I'm going to train a 40-year-old woman the same way that I might train like a 15-year-old
Mhm.
with the same exercises. Like if you can squat, we're going to squat. If you can lunge, we're going to lunge. If you can bench press, we're
Yep.
going to bench press. Like that kind of stuff. But yeah, like you said, like the actual, um, you know, the volume and the intensity, that's where the difference comes in. Because
Yep.
I don't need to train a 40-year-old woman the same way, you're training a collegiate athlete in that
Hmm.
sense. Yeah.
And I think another way to look at it is people. It's just the way you structure your training. Like
Mhm.
it doesn't have to always be like high load all the time. Like the way that like we're currently running a phase for the athletes that are at Athletes Warehouse, where they're basically getting prepped to go into the season.
Okay.
So they're right now they have a lot of high volume throwing. So baseball, they're throwing off a mound. The volume of throws is a lot more.
Mhm.
So that since that intensity is so much higher, weight room intensity then has to be kind of a little bit lower than it would be as we were going like coming straight out of the off season.
Sure.
Um, so right now, some of those days that they're training, there might be a day that they don't actually touch a weight. Like we might
Mhm.
do just base movements. And we call it just like a regen day where they're just kind of getting solid movement quality in without having to overload it as much. And it's still taxing enough where they feel like they're getting a workout in as opposed to being crushed underweight.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's got to be a balance to everything, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't, like with these athletes, like you said, we're going into baseball season in the next couple of months.
Yep.
Obviously, you want them to be in peak shape, but you also don't want to, beat them down to the point where they're already exhausted going into a season that's,
Mm-hmm.
going to be like, 3, 4, maybe even 5 months long. So that makes a lot of sense, and I think again, it's important to have these kind of structures, put in, especially when dealing with athletes, and because now it's not just training to look good or feel good. Now you're training
Mm-hmm.
for a sport, and that is a whole other aspect that's coming
Yep.
in. Yeah, so it's definitely it's important. I think it makes a lot of sense. um, so anyway, going back to from my own personal experience now, going back to your post about like you don't have to have like an intense training session every single time you walk into the gym or you work out or whatever.
Yep.
I've even found, and again, I always like to talk about my personal experience because I've been in the gym for a while now. I started lifting weights when I was in like 7th grade and
Mm-hmm.
kind of learned on my own. I unfortunately was never really taught properly, so I had to kind of figure things out on my
Yeah.
own. Hence, a couple injuries that I'm dealing with or dealt with or whatever. But again, I've personally found I am now 31 years old. I'm not an athlete anymore. I did play in high school and a little bit in college. And I think there was part of me that always wanted to train in that sense. Like
Mm-hmm.
I went through a period, where I was personal training, and like my like max reps was like sets of 6, and then like everything else was like 3 by 3, and then 3 by 6 was like my volume or whatever.
Yep.
And I quickly learned that I probably couldn't sustain that for the long haul because I kind of fell into a pattern of kind of injuring my back, and then I'd have to
Mm-hmm.
rehab it, and then kind of start over from scratch, and then I'd build up some sort of strength again, and then I'd have another setback, and I kind of like found myself into this kind of rotating wheel of injury, recovery, build up strength, injury, recovery, build up strength.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, for myself, what I ended up doing was, all right, maybe I don't need to like be busting my ass every single time. Maybe I just need to focus on the quality of the movement, and making sure that I'm taking a specific weight and making it move as easily and efficiently as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Since I've adopted that mindset into my training, um, I have not had an injury since. I have kind of pieced and worked together this training program that works for me, but now I'm pulling from different modalities where I'm using isometrics, I'm using plyometrics, I'm using strength and hypertrophy all in the same training session, um, and also focusing on mobility as opposed to flexibility because that's two different things, but that's a whole other thing that we can dive into. Um, and I have found that this has been, it's worked wonders for me in my own health. I'm still building strength. It might not be as quickly as I had wanted to when I was, in my 20s. But again, I'm a phys ed teacher. I don't need to be the strongest person in the world. Like it's whatever. As long as I'm stronger than a bunch of 6-year-olds, I think I'll be okay. But again, and I've found this training program and this mindset that works for me, and I think it's important for people to find what works for them. Like you said, that
Yep.
there are people who who are phys ed teachers or have a desk job who they just want to be as strong as possible,
Yep.
and there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to
Absolutely.
also be smart about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And just like you said, like the goal is to be is consistency. And if you're doing the type of workouts where you have like great results and then there's an injury that comes, it's just a setback.
Then you're missing time. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, like and to piggyback off what you were saying, I had the
Sure.
same thing. Like when we were first working together, like I was all about like lifting heavy as I can, like uh, the way that I looked, like training 2 hours a day all the time because we just basically lived in the gym. I didn't have anything else to do
Yeah.
at that time. But you know what the thing about our industry is, the things that are sexy sell. Like it's sexy to lift a ton of weight. It looks good on social media.
There's a reason why the most popular fitness, on Instagrams are like half naked and juiced
Oh yeah,
up. So
yeah. My brother tells me all the time. He's like, because I'll talk to him about like, oh man, like I kind of want to get more like Instagram followers, get my social media presence up.
take
He's
your
like,
shirt
yeah, just
off.
keep fucking your shirt off, dude. No, I don't want to do that though,
Yeah.
man. Like that's not my thing anymore.
Yeah, it's. I will say for someone who's I've had the Instagram profile for maybe 2 years, year and a half, something like
Mhm.
that. I've been doing the YouTube for almost a year now. The going's slow. I know, dude. Right? You were one of my first interviews that I
Yeah.
had on here. It was like a year ago almost. It was like right around COVID time,
Yep.
like first COVID time. COVID always.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, and so my plan was to focus on like the information. Like
Hmm.
I just wanted to get the information out there to whoever was willing to listen. I wanted to
Yep.
talk to people who I respected and thought had good points of view and were knowledgeable in the industry.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, like I am living proof that like if you're there for informational purposes, it might not be as easy as if you slap on a pair of tight shorts and you stick a needle in your butt and lift 800 pounds.
Yeah.
But hey, here we are.
Yeah. I mean, there's the different avenues. Like there is like the where it looks good and it's like
Yeah,
fancy for social media, and then there are a ton of people who put out really good information, and those are pretty much the most of the people I follow on social media. So
so
there is still a market for it. It's just we have to acknowledge the larger market is what looks sexy and what's cool looking on Instagram.
there's a reason why the saying is sex sells, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So what else? What else is going on with you, man? Anything else?
Um, Nah, man, I'm getting excited to get these people, like the kids that I work with, to peak for the season.
Mhm.
You've got a lot of kids who've made some crazy jumps this year,
Yeah,
so I'm super excited for it. Like, there's a lot of kids who have never thrown a ball above 85 are now like creeping up towards 90, like that. I'm just super excited for these kids' futures,
that's all.
and then just planning for next year. Different training styles, training modalities, always trying to get better. Um, Pretty much that's really where I'm at right now. I'm super focused. I'm trying to learn as much as I can. Hoping to really just blow 2021 out of the water, dude.
I think you and the rest of the world is.
Yeah.
But that's awesome. So now you may have told this to me in one of our other chats, but are you guys? You're working with all different sorts of athletes, right? You're not just focusing on baseball because baseball's coming up, or is it just kind of like how the clientele comes in? Like, do you just have like an influx of baseball athletes because baseball season's coming up? Um,
So yeah. So we have like we naturally just train a lot of baseball, softball athletes just because a lot of the coaching staff are former like baseball, softball players.
okay,
We do train other sports. Like right now, I'm training a few kids for basketball. There's a couple of kids that play lacrosse that train, and I'm looking to branch out. Like I would really, what my goal is coming up is to get into more just like wrestling and
okay,
track. Like I would love to train those type of athletes too, just because like seeing someone run fast or just is crazy to me. And then wrestling is just a sport that I love. Like I'm a big combat sports fan,
Mhm.
so I would love to get those kind of athletes into the
Did you
gym.
ever wrestle or?
So I wrestled when I was in like middle school, but I had no idea that you can go to college for wrestling.
Oh,
So
really?
I was like, oh man, this is cool, but like I
Nah.
ain't going to. And so like, let's go play basketball or something. Like all of my friends play basketball or play
Sure.
football.
Yeah.
So but I have a true appreciation for the sport, and I just those are some of the hardest working athletes that I've ever seen because you always have to be on point. Like it's a class that has it's a sport that has weight classes. So
Hmm.
during a season, like you are constantly trying to stay around a certain weight, constantly trying to work and grind. And I just have so much respect for that sport.
Yeah. They're a different breed wrestlers.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember having a couple friends who wrestled in high school or whatever,
Mhm.
um, and you could just tell like their mentality changed. Like the day wrestling, like day one of wrestling, like it started till like the last day. Like it was just like this different like focus and zone
Yeah.
and some of them were miserable. Others like were super into it or whatever. But
I mean, they're depleted, most of them. Like they're always like
yeah, there's a whole lot of. I'm hoping. I mean, I'm not around it right now, obviously, but I'm hoping the nutritional guidelines are a bit better. Because I do
yeah,
remember friends who like were like cutting like 20 to 30 pounds and like looked not great during the
yeah.
season.
A lot of that is too is just a lack of education for how to properly cut weight. Like cutting
Yeah,
weight for a sport is extremely difficult to do. And then like as I was talking about before, like when you have to try to maintain a certain weight for like a longer period of time, like
hmm,
it's very difficult to do that right. Because then you get into the instance where someone's like constantly fluctuating weight, like
sure.
ballooning back up, trying to cut back down as soon as they can. So it's a really technical aspect of nutrition, and I think a lot more education needs to be done. Like there should probably be someone in the school who really just assists the coaches with weight cutting for their athletes. And I think a lot of times some of these athletes are cutting just way too much weight
Yeah,
to try to compete, and which is also not good.
yeah,
But hopefully, like just like you said, like we'll get some more assistance there, and that sport will continue to grow and get better.
yeah, dude. It's definitely a fascinating sport, and I know
Mhm.
that the people you know, who love it like genuinely love it. Like
Yep.
it's one of those sports where like you're all about it, and there's really no like in between.
Hmm. Yeah,
But that's
I
cool.
think
I
most
didn't
fights do
realize you
that.
were, kind of a wrestling buff. So I'm happy if you kind of get your hands more into that,
Oh
that
yeah,
client area.
yeah. I'm just a big combat sport. Like I just love that aspect of sports because that to me, like fighting is a sport that it's something you can't really play. Like if you are unprepared
Yeah,
in a fight sport, you can really get hurt.
yeah,
So it takes a lot of focus, a lot of commitment, and those are just like a different breed of athlete. Like it's not I'm not taking anything away from any other sport. Like you have to be committed to any sport in order to play it at a high level.
hmm,
But I just like you can go into a basketball game like
yeah. Well,
I
you're not getting
know
punched
it
in
a
the
little
face
bit.
in your average
Yeah,
basketball
yeah.
game.
Yeah, you can
So,
you can get really hurt in fighting if you don't know what you're doing. And I just have a ton of respect for people who just step inside the ropes.
I would have to agree. um, so anything else, man? Anything else you wanted to touch on, or
Yeah, I mean,
yeah?
so I talked about earlier just when we were talking about training and just how you don't need to beat yourself into the ground.
Mhm.
Um, Maybe I could touch on just like possibly a way to structure your training
I
week.
was gonna say, would
That
you
you
mind like
don't.
maybe laying out a way so people maybe might better
Yeah,
understand how to go about it as opposed to just kind of diving right in and you know whatever
yeah,
happens
absolutely.
happens.
100%. So most of your training is just going to revolve around what your goal is.
Mhm.
So again, like if your goal is more of a an aesthetic goal or just healthier lifestyle, you don't need to necessarily like bury yourself into the gym. Those are training goals where being consistent is going to matter more because it's consistent work over the long term is when you're going to see those results.
Mhm.
So for someone like that, depending on how many times a week that you're training, I would structure it with basically like if you're going to train 5 times a week, maybe like 2 to 3 days strength training, and then 2 days of maybe just like what I would consider just like a regen or just lower intensity training with just a different modality, maybe like doing some crawling. Animal flow is phenomenal for things like that, or just doing something where you're still getting activity in
Mhm.
without the beat down on your body. Like
Sure.
I remember we talked before, and you have times where you're doing like isometric training. To me, isometrics are a phenomenal tool to use that can be intense without the muscular breakdown that occurs with traditional strength training, like that have a concentric and eccentric movement component
Yep.
to it. So things like that. Like I like to use a lot of times. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but Dr. Yes's 1 by 20 method, where
Okay.
he basically just takes an assortment of exercises. It's basically total body workouts,
Hmm.
and you do one set of each exercise, but you'll do like a set of 20. And
Okay.
it's depending on how many times a week you're training. So if you're 3 times a week, you might have one day where it's a lighter 1 by 20, and then there's a medium intensity 1 by 20, and then there's like a higher intensity 1 by 20, where that's kind of like the hardest day of them, but
Sure.
you're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
yourself because the volume is low because it's just one set
Hmm.
of 20 reps for that particular exercise.
Hmm.
So that's one of the training philosophies that I like to use for that style of athlete.
Yeah, that's a new one for me. So
Yeah.
is that so? That's kind of built in almost as like not like a recovery week, or like is that like your training, or you're using that to kind of break up the training a little bit?
So that is your training.
That
So a
is the
lot of
training.
the
Okay.
time, yeah. So because it's it's super interesting how it's set up. Like all
Hmm.
of the people that I've seen use it, they've experimented with having this like a control group and a test group with it,
Sure.
and they found that the 1 by 20 method had like a ton of success without a lot of the wear and tear, I guess, that would be assumed with like a normal like 5 by 5 or a 5-3-1 method. Um, but you basically you can scale it based on the person.
Hmm.
Where say like if someone's a beginner, you might have a session with them where you're maybe using like between like 5 and 8 exercises. You using that 1 by 20, and then as they get more advanced and more experience in the weight room, you might even get up to where they're doing maybe like 15 to 20 exercises, but just a 1 by 20.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
so
interesting.
there's a ton of different ways to scale it.
Hmm.
We use it. We use like a version of it with our athletes where we're having their main movement will be like a 1 by 20, and then they'll have like different accessory lifts that kind of complement that movement and kind of complement the week.
Okay.
But we've seen like a lot of these kids are making tremendous gains off of it. So I'm liking the success that I see right now. I'm hoping to continue to experiment with it,
Hmm.
and see what changes we can make to it because it's not a methodology that's set in stone.
Hmm.
But I find that it's got really good results.
Yeah, no, that's something I might have to look into because
Yeah.
it does sound interesting and fascinating, and also like the way you describe it, it seems like it would plausibly be very beneficial,
Hmm.
especially when you're not trying to kill yourself kind of thing.
Absolutely.
um, no, that's awesome, man. I'm trying to think if there's I don't know anything new on my end, but
How's your training going now? Are you still doing like the long duration isometric holds and balance and?
yeah. So I'm as I mentioned to you, I think in a text, I had a COVID for a little while.
Mm,
So that kind of set me back. Like it was like 2 weeks where I just didn't do anything,
yeah.
and so that kind of I wouldn't say like set me back, but it was almost kind of like a little pause
Hmm.
in the training. So some of the isometrics that I've been doing, like I'll do like a split squat, so like with an elevated back foot, and I've actually built it up to where I can hold it out for 5 straight minutes.
Whoa. Okay.
Uh, um, so getting back into it after a 2 week break was tough. So I actually like eased myself in. I think I started with like 4 and then went back to 5. But yeah, so it's something. So how I've ended up structuring, my own personal training is that's how I'll start. I'll start with 2 isometric exercises.
Hmm.
Then so let's take a what's today? Today's Tuesday, right? Yeah. So my Tuesday looks like, and they're not your like typical isometrics where you're like pushing against an immovable object or something like so like with a split squat I'm not pushing against anything, I'm just holding myself up.
Yep.
So for me, let me I got it right here, let me pull it up, I'm drawing a blank. So Tuesday my isometrics are cross crawl Superman, so I'm flat on my stomach alternating
Yep.
arm and leg, that I'm doing for 5 straight minutes. My next one is a calf raise, so I'm just standing on my toes,
Hmm.
5 straight minutes. Now with that, I'm trying to keep myself as high as possible on my toes, but also
Yep.
while keeping my balance. So while I'm not maybe on my like tippy toes, I'm like I've graduated from like just keeping heels off the ground for 5 minutes to maybe like getting like halfway there. So I would say I'm probably like 3/4 of the way all the way up on my toes, and able to sustain that for 5 minutes without like losing my balance or anything like that.
I like that. I might do that today.
It's you feel it.
Yeah.
so um, then I'll always so after my isometrics I'll go into like a plyometric. I'll just add like one plyometric exercise that pertains to the like training that I'm doing. So today, like my strength exercise is going to be bench press. So I'm doing
Hmm.
explosive push-ups.
Okay.
So I'll just, ease myself like, down, explode off the floor. And I kind of keep that just like around 3 by 3. Like it's
Hmm.
nothing, it's to me, that's like how a plyometric should be. It's not like the P90X plyometrics where you're doing things for like a minute, which
Hmm.
completely defeats the purpose of plyometrics because it's supposed to be explosive. Um, so it's just 3 by 3. Then I'll go into. I usually every day I'll have one strength exercise. So today it's bench press, and then my
Okay.
hypertrophy sets. Um, I'll superset. So I'll have 2 supersets. So for me, it's going to be an offset RDL with like a kettlebell in one hand, and I'll
Okay.
just do 3 sets of 8 on each side. I'll superset that with an overhead press with a dumbbell, and then my last set will be a single leg calf raise with some weight, and then tricep extensions.
Okay.
And then I'll
Now, like, is
finish.
your leg straight for all your calf raises, or do you experiment with like the bent knee?
So as of right now, yes, I'm doing all straight leg.
Hmm.
When I was working out in a gym, I think I would split it because I
Gotcha.
know I know by splitting it, you're isolating your soleus or gastroc. Um, so I definitely it's one of those things I've like been meaning to do to like reintroduce, and then I've just like never done it. So now that you're putting me on the spot, I might have to. And then each day I'll finish off with another, and I'm going to put it in quotes, like isometric type thing, but it's really
Okay.
just it's kind of like 5 minutes of movement, so it's more mobility than it is actual like isometrics.
Yep.
So on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I do this spinal hygiene routine where
Mm.
I do all flexion extension of the neck, do lateral flexion extension, I'll do rotation, and then I'll do the
Yep.
whole spine where I dive down, and then it's all the same. It's flexion, extension, lateral,
Yep.
and rotation like the whole way down.
Solid.
And then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I'll do 5 minutes of just plantar dorsiflexion with my
Hmm.
ankles. And it's not about trying. For me, it's not about trying to get like as many reps as I can. There's no weight. I'm just lying on the floor on my back, pointing my toes like as far down as I can, and
Yep.
pointing them up as far as I can. But for me, it's
Mhm.
about the intent of the movement. So like I
Yep.
really want to feel like when I'm plantar flexing, I really want to feel like my calves flexing. When I'm
Mhm.
dorsiflexing, I want to feel my tibia anterior. Um, and for me, that was actually really important because I think I've told you at the worst, when my back injury was the worst, I had a herniated disc and I couldn't dorsiflex my left foot
Okay.
more than like maybe like a couple millimeters off the floor.
Hmm.
So that for me was super important. And right now, I got full range of mobility in both feet. So like that's to me like that's why I kind of like focus on like that mobility kind of aspect.
Gotcha. Just out of
Um,
curious, out of
yeah.
like curious, has the shape of your foot changed at all? Like
In
your
what
left
way?
foot,
Like
like
since the injury, or since I started doing all this kind of stuff?
since you've been doing like a lot of that lower leg training, just getting more like ankle positioning. Like,
I
I don't know if
don't
you
know.
practice before. Like,
I can't say I've paid attention to it.
okay.
I can tell you that it's definitely gotten stronger. Like I work out in my garage, so I
Hmm.
work out barefoot as often as possible.
Yes.
When it's 18 degrees out, I throw some socks on. Uh, um, but I think what I have noticed is that my foot seems to have actually gotten wider.
Ah.
Um,
Okay. Yeah. Like the toe splay.
yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So it's like I said, it's not. I don't know if I can answer it like specifically or like factually. It's not the right word I'm looking for, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yep.
Definitely, I can't give you like a definite answer because it's not something I've like measured or like really looked for. But if you're
Hmm.
asking me like, have I noticed anything? I do feel like yes, my toes have kind of splayed out a little bit, and that my foot has gotten a little bit wider since doing all those kind of no, kind of like the foot and ankle sort of stuff.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. The reason I was asking is because just a lot of that lower leg training, like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those muscles run into the foot.
Yep.
So sometimes, like especially what I noticed with the kids that I've trained, when I first introduced, just say like a tibialis raise to them, if they have extremely weak feet,
Mm-hmm.
they barely lift their feet up. into dorsiflexion. And then it's like sometimes like as a like I don't see it all the time, but there are certain kids that I'll notice that they'll actually start to build like some sort of an arch on the foot. Like it doesn't just roll into the ankle like the
Okay.
like how it was originally.
Hmm.
So that's why I was asking. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
if you
I've
have any,
always been a big proponent. I mean, I never wear shoes, so
I'm
I've
barefoot right
always
now.
been a yeah. So I'm saying, unless I'm like somewhere public where like
Yeah.
I need to wear shoes, like they're off.
Mhm.
So I've never had like an arch issue. Like I've always had like decent arches and stuff. I'm sure they've gotten a little bit bigger and stronger since I've like really started focusing on that kind of training. But again, it's not something I've like documented, so I can't like
Yeah.
be like yes. But dude, it's something that I think is vastly overlooked when it comes to
Oh,
training.
100%.
Like people, look, first of all, just probably like half the population is grossed out by feet. So like you're not really like looking at them as like your big, sexy, like beach
Mhm.
muscle kind of things. Um, but I have to say, like the stronger my feet have gotten, like everything else feels pretty damn good too. And it's
Yep.
one of those things. I've always been a big proponent of working from the bottom up,
Mhm.
and I even preached that as a trainer. And I have to say, I was probably like cutting myself short because wasn't really focusing on the bottom. I was thinking more
Yep.
like legs, not feet.
Oh yeah,
But
especially
yeah,
like
dude.
commercial gyms, like it's kind of frowned upon to take your shoes off, like you said.
Yeah, I also
So
like got a talking to from one of my training managers, just like you can't have people squat barefoot, and I was just like, but it's better, and you know this. Like,
uh
so we agreed like we could do socks, or they had to buy chucks, but
mm, that sucks.
yeah, it's just like all right, we'll compromise.
Have your how's your footwear been like? Because I know like so since I'm pretty much barefoot all the time, and I
Hmm.
wear like minimalist shoes. It's
Hmm.
hard for me to go back to conventional shoes and wear those.
Um, New shoes suck, so I
Yeah.
have to like break them in,
Mm.
and the breaking in process is a pain. And I have, and now that I'm like vocalizing this and speaking to you about it, it's starting to like put the pieces of the puzzle together. I have these new Adidas that I'm wearing for like work, and they
Mhm.
squeeze like right in the toe box, which is where my
Yep.
foot's getting wider. So like now that I'm saying this, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But um, so like I kind of have to just deal with it. I also have a pair of Converse that like I wear like a lot, um, and I kind of get away with because they're like Justice League, so they've got like all the cartoon characters on them, and the kids get a kick out of them, and teachers will be like, "Oh, did you get those for the kids?" And I'll be like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
for the
Like,
kids." But I'm super comfortable in those, and like once the shoes break in, like I'm okay. It's just like the breaking
okay.
in process is a pain, and whenever, like I said, whenever I can take them off, I do.
Hmm.
um, yeah, man. So, I mean, is there anything else you wanted to touch on, or feeling pretty good about
Nah,
everything?
I think I'm good, dude.
Dude,
I'm.
it's always nice to chat. Bummed you're not coming to the wedding. Got to call you
I
out on the
know, man.
internet.
I know. I saw the date, and I was just like,
Where are you
all right.
going?
I was like, if I get back, I can like take a COVID test on like a
Squeeze it
Thursday.
in.
Hopefully, like I'll get my test back results. And I was trying to do it, but I was like, that's kind of like a shitty situation to put somebody in. Like,
Yeah, I mean, look, we've adopted the everyone's just doing what they're comfortable with. Like I've already
yeah,
gotten plenty of like, we're sorry, but it's just not something we're comfortable with. I was fine, like it's
yeah.
whatever.
I was
However,
comfortable going, man. I just,
yeah, I mean, look,
I'm going
if
to,
you can squeeze it in, let me know. But
yeah, I'm going to Lake Tahoe in
okay,
California. Um, I have another friend that's getting married probably
oh,
maybe like a
I
week and
see
a
how
half
it is.
after you. So
Okay,
I had already committed to his bachelor party, like to go there and hang out.
yeah,
And then I got your invitation. Was it? My mom said it came like this
yeah.
past week, and I saw the date, and I was like, like, dude, I already feel bad because I couldn't make it to the first. That it was like your birthday party at the.
It
It was
was
a.
that
It was a
the
bar.
bachelor
I think.
party.
Yeah. Was it your bachelor party?
Well,
No, I think it was just like a get together at like
my
a
30th.
bar or something
Yeah,
like
we
that.
had a we did my 30th at like a brewery up by me.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
I couldn't make it to that, and I was like, oh man, I already feel bad about that. It's like, fuck, it's like I owe Lynn a lot, man. Like,
you're avoiding me, man. No, like I said, whatever. It is what it is. We completely understand given the state of everything. Like,
hey man, look, if the
it's
quarantine rules
crazy.
change in the
Yeah.
next month, I am there.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, again, who the hell knows, right? Tomorrow it might be like,
yeah.
hey, COVID doesn't exist anymore, so everybody do what you want.
I mean, certain states that's already.
Yeah, I mean, there is Florida. But, and again, speaking from personal experience, COVID does exist, people. So, and it's quite unpleasant. Um, anyway, no worries. Thanks for coming on as always, man.
Oh yeah,
Coach Stephen Portee, what's your social media and all that? Athletes Warehouse, all that good stuff. Shout yourself
yeah.
out.
So social. My personal social media is S_Portee. It's basically S_PORTEE. Follow me. I'm trying to work on putting out some like really solid information. So hopefully, like following me, you'll get some good info. It's not just me with my shirt off.
Not hopefully, you will. You'll get some
No,
good info.
I try to avoid it, man. I try to avoid it.
No. I'm saying not hopefully. Like they
Oh
will
yeah,
get
yeah,
good info. Like
yeah.
you know what you're talking about.
You can also follow Athletes Warehouse on Instagram. We also have what's called Velo University, which is basically like our baseball
Sounds
social
like a
media.
baseball thing.
Yeah, it's 100%.
Yeah.
And then we also have Softball Strength Academy for anyone who plays softball. Coach Cassie runs that, and she is a hitting genius. So if you want any great drills on hitting, whether it's for softball or for baseball, you can definitely give that page a follow.
Nice, man.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming on as always. Always nice to chat, and thanks again.
Ah, man, always a pleasure.
All right, take it easy.